Let's talk to social commentator Emma Webb. Good evening, Emma.
Good evening, Kevin.
This is a brilliant speech, wasn't it, about cancel culture? He went through the whole gambit, saying that wokery is a kind of one-track thinking. It's taking shape, one constrained to deny history, or worse yet, to rewrite it. He said it's a form of ideological colonisation, one that leaves no room for freedom of expression and is now taking the form of the cancel culture, invading many circles and public institutions. Interestingly, he said cancel culture in English, so I think he knows the kind of countries he's talking about. He goes on, under the guise of defending diversity, cancel culture ends up cancelling all sense of identity, with the risk of silencing positions that defend a respectful and balanced understanding of various sensibilities. And what he's saying there is, if you don't agree with people, deal with it. That is part of life. But it was a brilliant speech, wasn't it?
Absolutely. Who'd have thought the Pope is sound as a pound? It's brilliant. Even the way that he refers in this speech to the use of the term hermeneutics, which is a theological term referring essentially to the methodology that you apply. And he says that you shouldn't apply the hermeneutics of the present to the past, which is something that in other terms many of us have been saying for
you and I have discussed that many times, that it is absolutely ludicrous for people in the 21st century to get their knickers in a twist, blood boiling with rage about Edward Colston, who died 300 years ago. Yes, he was a slave trader. I can handle it. It's ridiculous to say this man was evil because he didn't understand 300 years hence in the 21st century we would find the way he made a living unacceptable. It's ridiculous. It's moronic. It's asinine. And the Pope basically is saying that.
It is, and I think that what's remarkable about this is the way that he, in the speech, as you mentioned, it was so strong, so robust that he's really touching on something that is really deep at the core of everything that's going on here, which is that this new wave of ideology that is sweeping across Europe and sweeping through our public institutions cuts right to the very core of our identity in the West, and in itself is anti-Christian. And the Pope made a similar speech back in December where he used the same phrase, ideological colonisation, and that was in reference to a European document that was advising people to not use the word man, instead to use the word human, and to not refer to Christmas during the holidays. So I think what he's really touching on here is that there is an anti-Christian and a deeply anti-Western root in a lot of this ideology that's spreading through our institutions, trying to revise our history. And as I know, there are many other commentators who have said this as well, that this is coming at the same time that we've seen the Archbishop of Canterbury really just towing the line when it comes to this particular ideology. It'd be remarkable to see Justin Welby say something similar to this, and it would be almost unimaginable to think of him doing so.
And also, it looks as if Pope Francis isn't the kind of guy, unlike Justin Welby, to announce a sort of statue review of all churches and cathedrals so that the churches in his religion can be subjected to vandalism, which is what Welby did about the Canterbury Cathedral and the churches around the country. Unbelievable. But I like this idea, under the guise of defending diversity, and we're talking about cancel culture here, it ends up cancelling all sense of identity. And so, for example, Emma, please excuse my old-fashioned terminology, but you're a woman. But under cancel culture and wokery, you must be referred to as a person with a cervix. That cancels your identity, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think it does. And I think that he's also potentially getting at a broader point here as well. And he made this point when he was referring to the European Union, that the European Union should be careful not to eliminate the differences between countries across the continent. And I think, as he's making a sort of a deeper point about the impact of this ideology, the fact that in cancelling our history, revising our history, in restricting people's freedom of speech, and as he put it, to put across views that are of the correct sensibilities. That they are, it's knocking down our identity as a continent at the very roots, and part of that is through an attack really on Christianity. One example of that would be, as you say, I am a woman. Eliminating the categories of, the traditional categories of the sexes is something that is just antithetical to a Christian worldview, the idea that there are men and there are women. And you mentioned also the Pope's previous comments about family. He's putting forward robustly a Catholic and Christian perspective, a Catholic and Christian worldview that is antithetical to this, I suppose you would say, woke ideology. And what is most remarkable about the robustness with which he's asserting this, is that Pope Francis has become known as the progressive Pope, in comparison to Pope Benedict, who came before him, who was far more traditional and old school. For Pope Francis, the most progressive of popes, to come out and say this really means something. And we've seen people leaving the Church of England in droves, and going over to the Catholic Church. And I think many people will see this as a kind of beacon of, really Christianity being a rock, not being afraid to assert what it actually believes. And to say, actually, no, this is the worldview that we think is true, and that some of the things that are coming from this ideology sweeping across the continent, as he put it, are simply untrue.
And so here's to the Pope, big up to the Pope for he's a very important man, and he has the right to make such proclamations, because he really does have a moral pedestal from which he can preach, and I'm so glad that he used it with this incredible common sense speech about the madness of wokery and the pernicious nature of cancel culture, and I think that's good, because I think there are more than 1 billion Catholics around the world. That's a message that's going to hit home and maybe help us begin to fight back and win a war against wokery. What a shame that the head of our state religion, Justin Welby, seems enthralled to wokery and is quite the reverse, takes a view that is quite the reverse to that of His Holiness. What's wrong with Welby?
It's a question I've asked myself a lot. Giles Udy, the historian, has written quite extensively about this, and it's very interesting that there are certain parts of the Church of England that have been heavily influenced by a certain type of theology that is really the theological equivalent to critical race theory. And this is something that seems to have seeped into many parts of the church. Of course, religious people very often want to be seen to be doing good. And I think that this understanding of the world is something that has fed into that, and many people, either knowingly or unconsciously, subconsciously, have absorbed some of these ideas that are fundamentally unchristian. And as I say, this is something the historian Giles Udy has talked about at length. I think really, in many ways, the Archbishop of Canterbury and the Church of England has simply lost its way. It's lost touch with the rest of the British people, and it's a reason why the church is in terminal decline. I think they've ceased to be a church, and Justin Welby now runs it more like it's a woke corporate.
Yeah, and let me tell you, this is a fact. The vast majority of people in this country, and indeed around the world, have learned long ago to live with the fact that 300 years ago there was slavery. It's not a thing that people lie awake at night worrying about. And we've been seized by these woke idiots who want to obsess on the past. It doesn't matter anymore. Worry about modern slavery, not about Edward Colston. It's absurd. Emma, great to talk to you.